everyone, welcome back to the Raupp Museum storage area. My name is Marina and I'm the registrar at the Raupp Museum. Today during our blue box opening we are going to take a look at some textiles. So a lot of the textiles in this box are clothing between the 18 and 1900s. So let's dive right in. The box number for this one is box 50, and we have a list of everything in the box on top again, just like last time. All right. So let's bring out our first two textiles, and I'll place these down here. So the main ideas about textile preservation are that they are some of the most sensitive types of museum collections. They are sensitive to light damage, mold, mildew, pests, temperature, humidity, so we try our best to really create a safe space to limit that possible deterioration over time. Our first two objects over here are baby bonnets. And this first bonnet on the left is from between 1909 and 1915. It was worn by Michael Raupp's children. The Raupps were one of the founding families in Buffalo Grove. And we actually have a photo of his daughter Marie Raupp wearing this bonnet in 1909. This bonnet is hand crocheted, and as you can see on the design here, it has a star in the top. And we have put some acid-free tissue inside to help stop the folding of the bonnet over time. This bonnet over here is from 1942 to 1943, and this bonnet is made of satin. So you can see a little bit of a style difference between the two. This was made and sewn on a machine, whereas this one was hand crocheted. And bonnets were worn originally by women for hundreds of years, and then slowly they fell out of fashion, and now today only babies usually wear bonnets like this, but these are styled after styles that women may have worn. The other object we have, or two objects we have with these baby bonnets, are baby shoes, and these baby shoes belong with this bonnet here. They were also worn by the same baby in 1942 to 1943. And baby shoes are, we put in the tissue here to help keep its shape, but baby shoes are considered more of a memento today. So your baby can only wear the shoes for a short period of time, and then people will hold on to them as a sort of memento for when the child was really young. All right, so let's take a look at what else we have in our box. All right, this next colorful textile is called a pocket. And women actually wore, up until about the early 1900s, women actually wore pockets inside their dresses, but they weren't part of the dress. They were tied around the waist. So into the early 18th century, excuse me. And here, if you lift up the first flap, you can see where the pocket part is. Now, this particular pocket is actually from between the 1920s and 1950s. So it's a fairly recent pocket, so women were still wearing pockets into the 20th century, and it has a number of different designs from the flowers and the bow, and you can see it's fairly worn, so it does have some dirt still attached and discoloration, so it was used quite often by this woman. Let's move that over here. Take a look at our next object. And I'm just going to leave some tissue in between layers so that we don't have any color bleeding or want to damage the other textiles, because we talked about how sensitive textiles are in museum collections. next textile probably looks pretty familiar to a lot of people. This right here is a hand-crocheted doily. And doilies were originally used mainly for protection of wooden furniture. So you put this down so that you could put something on top on your furniture. They were also used in food service for a while and are continued to be used in food service, particularly in weddings. Now, the word doily is believed to have originated from a 1700s merchant who was named, a London merchant, who was named Doily. And he produced openwork textiles, and they became to be called doily napkins. Well, eventually they cut the napkin part, and the doily remained, which is why we have that name for these textiles here. And you'll notice there's a little bit of staining, and that's either from probably some type of oil from someone's hands, or it could be mold or mildew. Even light and oxygen all cause discoloration in textiles, which we'll see down as we continue to open our box here. Let's open up our next artifact. So this next textile probably looks familiar. It is a baby bib, and this bib was worn by the children that also wore this bonnet between 1909 and 1915. And bibs were actually worn by adults in the 17th and 18th century. If you were going to a nobleman's house in the 17th century for dinner, you would bring your own bib. And the phrase making ends meet, one of the theories for where that started is actually from bibs of men trying to reach the ends of the bib around their really fluffy clothes that they would wear in the 17th century. And this particular bib is a baby bib, which is, again, where most bibs are worn today, just by babies, just like bonnets are too. So they become more of a baby clothing exclusively today. Let's open our next. So this textile is, I'll turn it around so you can see the design better, is a handkerchief. And sometimes objects in our collection we just don't know the date of. So we know who donated this and when they donated it, but the extra information about when they got it was not collected. So on the design here, it says Souvenir of Victory. This is a little bit of a clue. So this handkerchief most likely is either a World War I or World War II souvenir. And we found similar designs to this handkerchief, but not something that is an exact match as what you see here. So we can't know for sure when the handkerchief was made. Satin handkerchief, and it has a really beautiful lace design around the sides here. But you'll notice that it's the coloration in the thread work here is bleeding onto the satin, or it has bled in the past. And so that red color here. So we're taking precautions to keep this object flat, wrapped in tissue paper to limit any more bleeding. Make sure it doesn't go through large fluctuations in temperature and humidity, so that hopefully we can limit any more type of damage like this in the future. All right, let's take a look as we go into our box. We're going to get some a little bit bigger clothes. All right, this next small dress is a baby dress. And this dress was worn in 1878 by a baby boy. And you'll notice there's some really beautiful lace-like designs along the front here. And the back is just a button-down design. There is quite a bit of that brown damage we were talking about in this dress. And those brown spots could be caused by a number of things. We talked about mold and mildew or oil from your hands, or it could be just a stain, a water stain, and as well as clothing, particularly light cotton, it gets older and older, oxygen in the air will actually turn it brown. So that could be caused by that as well. So we keep our artifacts in this box to try to limit that. In addition, something with textile preservation is we lay them flat because that provides more of a complete support. We don't want to lay this dress on an actual hanger because then it puts stress on this part of the textile. So the best way is really to lay it flat. In addition, we want to keep it folded, if we have to fold it, along previously folded lines so that we're not creating any more creases in the object itself. All right, let's take a look at our next piece of clothing. Move this up. So this next baby outfit, this is an underskirt. So it's not actually a dress. It was worn by the same baby boy in 1878. And the underskirt is basically like a baby's petticoat. So it would have been worn underneath another dress. So there are some pretty designs on the bottom that may have shown through, which is why they've taken extra time with these designs here. They look almost like little strawberries. But the rest of the clothing is fairly plain. All right, let's take a look what else we have. Okay. This next piece of clothing is so this is called a union suit. That might look familiar to some of you. Might look like long johns or long underwear. That's essentially, it served a similar purpose. Union suits, this one in particular was worn between about the 1930s to 1940s. And union suits were invented actually in the 18th century for women. They were considered a more comfortable alternative to Victorian clothing. But men saw them and thought, hey, that looks really comfortable, and it became more of a men's fashion in the 19th and 20th century. So this is a men's union suit, and you'll notice that it's more of a yellow color. It's probably discolored a little bit over time, and it has a little bit of fray damage along the edges, so it probably got a lot of use during this time. And this one was invented by a company called Yoke Knit Company, which made a lot of types of undergarments in the 30s and 40s. And we've kept this union suit folded this particular way because that's the original fold lines when it was donated. So we don't want to create any new fold lines. And for small museums, space, and any museum really, is always an issue. So we take we get a big as box as we possibly can to fit in the collection, to lay these out as flat as we can so that they're preserved the best way that the museum is able to. Our next object is so big, I cannot unfold it all the way. But this is a woman's nightgown from between about 1920 to 1950. And you'll notice there's some beautiful design here at the top. This top part of fabric actually is called a yoke. A yoke is a name for a specific patterned piece of clothing, usually around the neck and shoulders. And this dress has similar damage to the other objects we've seen already, with a few brown stains, some light discoloration, but overall in good condition, especially these design sections that you see there. women since about the 14th century. So petticoats have been around a long time. And this particular petticoat, you'll notice, has significant discoloration damage on this end here when compared to the top. And as we know, this is possibly due to oxidation. So over time, the fabric being exposed to oxygen changes it this brown color, particularly for white fabrics like this cotton petticoat. And this petticoat is considered an undergarment. Petticoats have changed drastically over the hundreds of years that women have been wearing them. In even the 18th century, they were considered exterior garments, so they were much more highly decorated and meant to be seen on the outsides of clothing. But then in the 1900s and 19th century, they became seen as more undergarments. So they've changed, and that's changed the style too. Petticoats actually came back into fashion in the 1950s, thanks to the designer Christian Dior and his 1947 new line, which emphasized large, floofy skirts for women, which required petticoats. So that's why in the 1950s you saw a lot of really poofy skirts, was because of Christian Dior. All right, let's see what we have. We have 2 pieces left. This next object is a little bit different, this next textile. And I put these in plastic bags because they have some type of damage that I'm not sure what it is yet, but with help from conservators and other museum professionals, we will figure out what is going on with this object. So these are men's leggings. They were worn by a U.S. Navy veteran in World War II. And you'll notice here there's some discoloration on the back, some white coloration. That could be due to mold or just from being worn, just dirt from being worn. So I put them in bags as a precaution so that it doesn't get to other objects, and I'll further wrap them after the presentation to make sure that they're safe and that everything else in the box is safe too. Now these leggings were made by the Tweedy Footwear Company for the Army and Navy during World War II, and they were produced to be worn over your boots and your calf during the war so that the Army and the Navy could conserve leather, because leather is much more expensive, so they didn't want to create boots that had a high, that would go up over towards your knee. So to conserve that leather, they made these leggings so that dirt wouldn't get in your boots and underneath your pants. Dirt and mud as you were during the war. So if you take a look, this is actually the name of the individual who wore these leggings and the name of Tweedy Footwear Corporation that made the leggings as well as the size, so size 3. Place this back in here for safety. And you'll notice that I'm also wearing gloves while I do this. It's important both for the objects, to protect the objects from the oil on my hands, but sometimes also objects have chemicals on them that could get on my own hands. So it's for my safety and for the object's safety. We don't have to worry about chemicals on these objects, but we have other objects in our collection that do have. All right, let's take a look at the last textile in the box. And I'll just unfold this. So this textile is a pair of men's baseball pants, and these were worn between the 1920s and 1930s, and they're made of wool, so they're really heavy fabric. called Lowe and Campbell Athletic Goods. And they were in business until 1931, and then they were bought by Wilson Sporting Goods after that in the 1930s. These are a size 34, and they have the label, original label of the company Lowe and Campbell that made them here on the inside. But they're in fairly good condition considering they were baseball pants. There's a little bit of a brown stain here, possibly from dirt. And there's also a tear in the pants on this side. So we're just taking extra care on those particular sections so there's no further damage. And then we use the tissue paper in between the pieces so that multiple layers of fabric aren't laying against one another. So that's the last